Welcome to the Forest of Thoughts with me, Ingrid Rieser. Is it possible to look clear-eyed at the enormous challenges we're facing today and still do something practical and creative in the face of that? What happens when we engage with nature and people in an embodied way, rather than through their representations in statistics and media? And how do we stand up for what we believe in, but without falling into the dehumanizing tribalism of us versus them? Today I'm speaking to environmental sociologist and podcast host, Ashley Fitzgerald.
You don't get to live in a diverse society, a functioning diverse society, without some measure of moving beyond the tribal mindset. You have to have some grace for people. You have to see them as a whole person. My sense is that there's so much worth saving, and it's actually just a matter of showing up and breathing life into it. You can't believe how much power there is out there to take if you just show up. Nobody is showing up to these things.
Ashley holds a PhD in environmental sociology, is the creator of the Rizoma Field School, and a host of the Doomer Optimism podcast. She organizes Doomer Optimism events, bringing together constellations of writers, thinkers, farmers, and practitioners from all sides of the political spectrum. We met on a hot day in downtown Chicago, among the tall skyscrapers facing the river. How did you find this phrase, Doomer Optimism? Can you say something about what that really means?
Yes, sure. So during the pandemic, I found some friends on Twitter, just by sort of like writing about what I was doing at the time, which was living in Uruguay in South America on 9 acres. Why I was doing that, and part of why I was doing that was because I had this very doomer attitude about America, being in the center of empire during collapse, thinking about societal breakdown, and, even things like when I was moving to Uruguay, we looked in like sea level rise, where do you want to buy land, extreme weather events, this kind of thing. So I said, my chair just bent down. I just said, I want to go somewhere that's like safe, where there's like more risk mitigation for my kids and family, 2 little kids at the time. Anyway, so I have this doomery concept, but, despite the doom, I'm forging ahead for my family, finding this beautiful life in South America, raising them, this lovely existence. So anyways, during the pandemic, sort of isolated and bored, got onto social media, started talking to some friends on Twitter. And I met Jason Snyder, who is like my co-conspirator in this whole thing at the beginning. And he said, I'm kind of a doomer, but, I'm an optimist despite it. And he's also a homesteader, agroecology professor at Appalachian State University. So it's like, find points of hope, find points of agency. And so after he said that, I said, yeah, we're the Doomer Optimists, like get the Doomer Optimists. Let's unite the Doomer Optimists. And it sort of took on a life of its own.
That's so cool. Well, just to backtrack a little bit, can you say something about the work, like your background? Because you're an environmental sociologist,
yes,
which
okay.
I don't really know what is even.
So, okay, let me back up even a little further. Yeah. So, grew up, I can do this quickly, but I grew up pretty working class. My dad's a Chicago firefighter here on the south side of Chicago. We did not have books in the house. Mm-hmm. So I I got a scholarship to the University of Chicago because they give some scholarships to the children of firefighters. Okay. So that was a big trajectory change for me. Wow. In college, I took this class called Is Development Sustainable? It was part of this series of classes on big picture problems. I think it was called Big Problems classes. And the answer to that question, at least what the professors impressed upon me, was development is not sustainable. This continued growth is just not sustainable. So I kind of got radicalized by that class, where it's there are 2 different paradigms here. This development paradigm of techno-optimism and more growth and more corporate, arms into every part of our lives. And then sustainability, which is something else, which just it's opposed. It's diametrically opposed. Then after that, I traveled around the world on a shoestring. Like I saved up money nannying and then went on trips like working on organic farms all across Asia, Europe, and learned a lot about food systems this way. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, I'm for sure not going to live in the center of empire. I'm a doomer about this, but I'm going to get my PhD because this is how like doomery and like preppery I am. I was like, I should get my PhD because that just like opens up more options for immigration because you're like this highly trained person and this is how immigration people think, whatever. So I said, I'm gonna get my PhD in something related to food systems, sustainable food systems. So I ended up going to Washington State University. They do environmental sociology, which is basically like, you know, understanding human environment interactions. Anyways, I ended up doing my dissertation research on people who self-produce at least 50% of their own food in Chicago.
Wow.
Interviews.
That's cool.
So all of this stuff is like building on each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so then...
I'm super curious. What did you find in those interviews?
It was actually a very optimistic set of findings, which was, first of all, I interviewed like city people and rural people. Mm-hmm. And so what I found was people were doing the same kinds of actions, but for different reasons. So it was almost like their sense of the doom was different, but their action was all the same. And so what I found was, for example, once people got above like a 50% level, and this is these are just rough numbers, obviously, but like, you know, beyond just like a backyard garden, they're really trying to produce some of their calories. They start to troubleshoot and or have to reach out to other people for like, let's buy feed together and split it. Like, how do you deal with chickens in the winter? How do you, like, they just talk shop. And then this like sort of network has formed, both like a sort of intra-urban rural network of like small scale food producers, and they can talk to each other about the food production and it doesn't have to do with the politics. Okay, and then I had this big like flip in my thinking, which was, it's so absurd that we build friendships and relationships over like, hey, are you a degrowther or not? That's a very fragile relationship if it's based on like ideology. What's much more interesting and resilient relationship are these kinds of relationships built on some practical matter.
Right.
So then that informed a lot of my thinking after seeing that. And also another thing that informed a lot of my thinking was there's a real attack of environmentalists on rural people, especially farmers. And they think that they're like backwards, and environmentalists in general have like gone off the deep end with not that I don't think this is an important issue, but the sole focus on climate change, yes, you know, totally. Instead of like biodiversity and pollution and all these other issues. And a lot of these rural people I talked to were quite conservation-minded land stewards. I mean, I talked to a flower farmer and he's like, you know, what we want to do as little input as possible. He grows his own food, he hunts, but sustainably, like thinking about populations, making sure he's not taking too much, like, you know, made his own beer and wine, all this stuff. And I had this like, I don't know, light bulb go off that there's a way bigger coalition out there, but it can't be ideology. It's got to be practice.
Oh, interesting.
Oriented.
Yeah. Because did those farmers feel that, you know, if you're an environmentalist or somebody working in that field, that you don't really know what you're talking about, or that you're working against?
Yeah, I mean, farmers. A lot of times they're completely right that like there are environmentalists, let's just say quote unquote, who work in offices, who focus solely on spreadsheets and one indicator, which is climate. And they will write policies that literally harm farmers. I mean, like I at this conference today, and like there's more and more talk about like this precision agriculture or climate smart agriculture, and what that means
in smart.
Yeah, what that means in the practical reality for the farmers is that they have to put a bunch of gadgets on their tractors that then gets monitored by some person in some office somewhere, and the gadgets constantly break, and they're constantly pressing like, you know, override, delete, and they're just trying to do their farming. And it ends up being like this weird surveillance state, techno dystopia
the center surveilling the periphery,
yes.
even though they're not.
And I'm like, and not that farmers are not culpable. There's plenty of bad industrial farmers who do really bad practices, a lot of which are sort of incentivized by subsidies and all this other stuff. But it's just this weird dystopia and like oppositional attitude. And then there's another thing, which is you must capitulate to the belief in climate science to farmers. And in my opinion, I can work with somebody on like an organic farm. I could ask a farmer about how do you keep chickens without saying, first and foremost, declare your allegiance to climate science,
right?
Which is a very abstract,
it's very abstract
and complicated scientific field. Why do I have to make them capitulate to that? Just to work together on something we both agree on,
right? So
that has been my like sort of radical frustration with the way the environmental things have gone. And so then I went to Uruguay and finished up my dissertation and wanted to learn some of the stuff that I put into practice, some of the things I learned in my dissertation research and my different, experiences on these various farms. And so we bought 9 acres, trying to do some like rotational grazing and chickens and perennial agriculture things. And I started this field school, Rizoma Field School, which was like, we're going to try to make some money while we're down in Uruguay. Not a lot, but enough to sustain our little lifestyle there. And I'm like, I have my PhD. So I also had this like turning point in grad school where I was taking an environmental sociology class. There was a paper we read about scientists studying salmon populations. And there was one set of scientists who did computer modeling and another set of scientists who just like counted the salmon. This was like, dam, the trying to figure out the environmental impact for dam building. Yeah. And of the ones that counted were like way more accurate than the computer models. Wow. And it was just like this light bulb moment of like, we got to just get out into the world. We've just got to stop with the computer modeling and the AI. And it wasn't AI then, but just like the abstraction. Science is an abstraction. Climate is an abstraction. I still, like I said, I'm not like a climate science denier. It's just such an abstraction. And so like we have a whole, history of naturalism where you're out in the world observing things. And so I had this idea, I want to get students out into the world. So the students come, they work like hands-on with these agroecological farmers there. A lot of times I don't even tell them anything in advance. Like, we're not going to do theory or anything. You're just going to go do the work that the farmers do every day. And then we talk afterwards, like, why are you farming this way? What's important about it? What are your values? And this kind of cultural exchange thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you started your school, but then what made you leave this paradise and go back to the center of empire?
I know. Okay. So, I mean, everything in life is a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So we had this like idyllic little existence, beautiful neighbors, super, super lovely community, tons of practitioners, people who like put into practice these environmental values, not just like for environmental or sustainability reasons, but for like reasons of thrift and economics. Like people share things. It's too expensive. Everything's too expensive in Uruguay. So it's like people share resources, all of this stuff. My kids were really little at the time when we moved, and we spent 7 years there. So like this idyllic little, kindergarten for them with the little chickens running around. Beautiful. We lived near a beach. So we'd spend many hours like on the beach and people just drinking mate together. So it was lovely. But there was a couple of things. That last year before we moved back, I had come back to the US for this Doomer Optimism event and then 2 other events where I'm like traveling from South America to come back. And I felt this pull of like, if you want to make some change, maybe you do need to go back into the center of empire to do it.
Right. That's the thing.
You can't really do it from the periphery that well. You have to meet people in person. You have to like do things. And if you want to be, an agent of change, like maybe there's something about being born in this part of the world that I have like some responsibility, Then every time we came back to, my kids were just missing their cousins more, missing their grandparents, aunts and uncles. And I just kind of had this switch of like, I know what the trade-off is. I'm going to go clear-headed into it.
Right, because you had that time in this other kind of type of existence, which was probably really important in order to enable the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so it was like, while the kids were little, to the extent that you can have this like ecological childhood of like nursing my babies, holding them a lot, present motherhood, like where they're like on my body, like holding them constantly, you know, while they're little babies, that was really important to me. And so like having that period where I've sort of like set them up with this, I guess it's like attachment theory, this secure attachment. They had a beautiful babyhood, beautiful like toddlerhood and into childhood. But then as we were getting, the oldest was about 10 when we decided to leave. And she was just starting to get like, maybe she was more ambitious. She wants to do a theater program, a lot of things we didn't have there. And there was also like an interesting cultural question of like, Uruguay has a beautiful culture, and so does where I'm from in the south side of Chicago. There's some overlaps to it, but there's some differences, strong differences. And I was like, it's really just, I love this culture and I can appreciate it, but it isn't mine. Mm-hmm. It isn't the culture I was raised in. And in some ways, there's like some tension about like the underlying assumptions of the culture. Anyways, we just reached a point where I'm like, I'm going to go clear-headed back into Chicago, back into the center of Empire. I'm going to have this trade-off where life is going to be way busier. We're going to be way more ambitious as a family. But the trade-off is, you know, we've got all this network of relationships. We've got this constant social interaction of family and neighbors and friends. All the Doomer Optimism events, like I'm getting to meet all these amazing people and just getting back into the mix of it. So it's like broadest possible sense, like this sweet periphery, life on the beach, calm with your holding your babies, and then like, you know, advanced, you know, city connection, ambition.
Look at where we are now.
I know,
you know,
we're in the middle of downtown, and it's just like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, we would have no like luxury existence like this. Yeah. It was like more, you know, everything is like dirty. You're on the farm. There's always tracking dirt in. There's chickens everywhere. Yeah. So it's just I've lived many worlds, different lives, and I just
can appreciate the things of each. Yeah. I can recognize that. Yeah. But so it feels like what a big part of your work now is trying to build community, and something we talked in preparation for the podcast. We talked a little bit about this tribalism that can emerge that when things get difficult, and like you said, when we focus maybe too much on ideology. So I don't know, do you want to say something about your ideas about building community, what that means, and how we do it?
Yes. So I think it goes, I mean, a lot of it goes back to that insight with the dissertation research, which was we have got to stop making caricatures, ideological caricatures of one another. Right. It's just, it doesn't lead anywhere good. And like, not to be, I'm not like a progressive in the sense that like I think societies are necessarily progressing forward, or that will like always be the case in every aspect. There's always like trade-offs with something you might call quote unquote progress and whatever comes with it. But there, to some extent in the United States, let's say, for example, we have these like Enlightenment ideals, which of course have trade-offs too, but it's like, you know, tolerance, plurality, like you don't get to live in a diverse society, a functioning diverse society, and we are a diverse society, like it or not, you know, we're like a nation of immigrants, without some measure of moving beyond the tribal mindset. You have to have some grace for people. You have to see them as a whole person, you know, that's always worthy of respect and love, you know, not dehumanizing them. And so to me, it's like, okay, maybe we can disagree about a lot of things, but does that mean I'm going to stop a relationship with you completely, even if we're on the same side on a lot of like practical issues? So that was a big thing with my dissertation work and has taken me into like all these different things, which is sort of like, I'm just not going to capitulate to the tribalism. Like, I just think things are much more complicated than that, first of all, than the ideological tribes. Like, there's many things I completely disagree with one tribe about, but agree with other parts. Mm-hmm. And vice versa with red and blue sides. And so these issues are very nuanced, actually.
Yeah, just an example of that is I remember a few years ago reading this study that was done that was called The Perception Gap. Have you heard of it? Mm-mm. So it's about what Democrats think that Republicans think and the other way around. Yeah. And it's interesting because they were often quite off about what the opposing party thinks about people who vote for the opposing party, what they think about different issues. And what was very interesting was that you would think that the more media people consumed, the more informed they would be. And so that they would be more accurate. And it was the opposite. Like, the more media you consumed, the more off you were because you were actually engaging with these caricatures that you were talking about.
Yes.
And the more that you knew people of the other party in your daily life, the more you realized the complexity. And the other thing was that you would think that being more highly educated would also make you more informed and for you to be more accurate. And it was not the case for like
that's so funny.
The most among the most disinformed, or like who had the biggest perception gap, were very highly educated Democrats. Yeah. So people with a postgraduate degree. Yes. And that has to do with probably that they just don't have very many Republican friends. But just so I thought that I bring up that study a lot because it just shows that like you said, things in the abstract. Yeah. So media being an abstraction and being like this representation of reality that is always curated is never going to inform us in the way that relationships will inform us.
Right. But it's actually so funny too, now that you say that, because I've said it explicitly, just earlier about ecology, like understanding your ecology by seeing it and observing it. But it's also true of people. people's nuanced, complex.
Right.
Everything is much more complex when you're in it and observing it personally rather than this abstraction of, okay, let's take some numbers about Republican attitudes and put that into a Pew survey. And that's what Republicans are, instead of like a real Republican sitting in front of you telling you, I hate pollution. I manage my, my hunting production to make sure that, or, consumption to make sure I'm not taking too much. I have like a really strong ecological ethic, like all these different things.
But let's go into this a bit more, because considering the political moment we're in now in the States. So I think that for a lot of people, they would be saying that, well, it's not about tribalism or something. It's about standing up for the things that you believe in and saying like to draw a line in terms of what the things that you think are okay and not okay. I think that that's what people how they are talking about this and saying like, well, I don't understand how somebody could be for these and these actions that these politicians are taking. So how do you respond to that?
I think about that. It's a thorny question, because I try to take like a 10,000 foot view to start with, which is, where are we at in history? Mm-hmm. We're on the downswing of empire. Things are disintegrating in the sense of I have the feeling that I'm like kind of a peak oil person. So you've got a lot of extra energy. You have this huge population growth, huge economic growth, a huge connection of globalization, globalized trade. And we're on the downside of that now. I think we're deglobalizing. Things that you once thought were sort of like just standard. This theory of that we're at the end of history. We're not at the end of history anymore. History's picking back up. And so things are disintegrating. It's hard to figure out who is to blame for that.
Right.
So a lot of times what people do is they'll blame like something proximate, or they'll say like Trump's policies, for example, are like so chaotic, and they are chaotic. But also like just take a step back. We're just in this chaotic period. If Harris had one, it would also be chaotic in some ways and also exploitative in some ways. So I try to just take a step back and say, like, the proximate thing isn't really the big picture story here. Now, having said that, there are certain things that are just like completely absurd political things that people are doing on all levels, including the Trump administration. Bad, absurd. But I just ask myself, like, does it make for a better or worse world for me to hate somebody proximate to me who might be a loved one or a neighbor based on like federal policies that, again, are like an abstraction to like a strong extent, an abstraction. It's not like, okay, so I voted for this guy voted for Trump and therefore he agrees 100% with every single abstract choice being made there. I don't think that's the case. Maybe they do agree with something you disagree with, but again,
disagreement can be okay.
Yeah, can you overlook that? And obviously there's a point at which you can't, and you don't have to associate with every person. Like that's actually like funny. We can get into the nitty gritty of like how Doomer Optimism has worked and how the community buildings worked. But there have been people who are like edge cases and who I've had falling out with because it was just too far. I can't associate with somebody who's willing to like say something so whatever, hateful or vile or whatever. It's something that I just like. There are people that go too far.
So you feel like it is okay to like draw a boundary, but that we have to think about how are we relating to the people around us, and does it have to do with our abstract and curated characters of who these people are, or is it like people that we're actually engaging with? And I think also, like you said, people also based on this perception gap idea, I think that people probably, whether it's in the States or in Sweden, people agree more with their political opponents than they think, or like people have, more similar values than they think anyway. They have values about, that it's important to, take care of each other. It's important to take care of family.
Yes.
It's important to, so you have a lot of ideas about values, but maybe not similar ideas about how to best put those values into politics.
Right. Well, okay. So here I have a little story about this. Another thing that was kind of a turning point for me when I was in college. I think even before I took that Is Development Sustainable class, I worked with this psychology professor, and she did political psychology, and she was running a study, and I was like the undergrad running the actual study, bringing people in, whatever. And the study was attitudes versus identities. And so the way that this was written up, this is so cool. If you're given a story like this environmentalist or this feminist, this identity, this is an environmentalist, thinks that we should not cut down the trees. If you just say, Diana thinks we should not cut down the trees, that we should manage the forests. When you say the identity, people have a stronger opposition than if you just say the set of values, the specific set of values. Like, I think that we should protect ecosystems. Like, who could disagree with that, Versus you say an environmentalist or a feminist, people project all sorts of weird things on. So there is like this tribal element once you like list the name.
Exactly.
The identity.
And I have heard that as well, that working with like talking about values is a very good way to be able to, move forward with those kinds of issues. And it's something that's not done very much.
Right.
And it's either, I guess in our society, we also focus more on economics, like the profitability of things and et cetera, or these flashy words or these identities rather than talking about common values.
Right. Totally. I mean, I think part of it too is like, there's this book called Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi. I feel like the Hate Inc. thing maybe
you could just give it.
Yeah, it's basically like the cable news networks and newspapers in general are incentivized to write salacious stories that, get people to keep tuning in.
So by making you feel a lot,
feel something strong. I mean, it's like it's almost like your lizard brain, the back part of your brain. You just want to like activate like enemy, good guy, bad guy. These stories of outrage, and you've got these like I have family members who watch so much partisan TV on both sides, both MSNBC and Fox News, whose minds have been warped in the time that I left the US to when I came back. Just thinking day after day of watching those bad guys on the other side, those bad guys there, and you're good. Can you believe how bad they are and how good you are? And it's a profit motive because the cable news companies want people to keep tuning in. Yeah,
because it becomes a kind of addiction in that sense, because you become, it's not like you're addicted to dopamine, but addicted to the feeling in a way that
yes.
gives you.
Yes.
Because it's you're feeling something, then you get hit again.
Yes,
and again,
exactly.
And, again.
And then you're feeling outrage, and then you're feeling, pride. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways my time in Uruguay was like nice because I was just I was unplugged from this like increasing polarization and tribalism. And now I can come back, and one thing that's gotten me in trouble on both sides is with Doomer Optimism. I'm just like, I'm just going to refuse to do the tribal thing. I'm just not going to capitulate to like an orthodoxy one way or another. And some people who are like orthodox believers in one thing or another have been like, Doomer Optimism, like, how can you platform this person from the other side or whatever? And I'm just like, we're just having a conversation. It's okay to talk to people. They're whole people, mm-hmm. And I've been like very resistant to that and trying to model, like, how can one be resistant to that kind of thinking? Yeah.
So that was, in terms of the building community part, that's one thing, having these conversations where we're engaging with whole persons rather than caricatures. What is there anything else you would like to say about this?
Yes, there's a couple of different things. One, it's really nice. We've resisted over the years this tribalism and the calls to sort of like cancel, or like, you're not part of our tribe because you have this, even on the right, you're not part of our tribe because you have this like climate scientist on. Okay, fine. I don't need you as a friend. I don't like, I'm not like begging for friends. And then, so I've just been like very pig-headed about that. Like, I'm willing to talk to anyone in this country. We believe in tolerance and diversity and free association. So I'm not going to get canceled by or you can try, but I'm not going to get canceled by the idea that I can have a conversation with people and treat them like whole people. And then these in-person events. So I'll tell you about the first one, the one that Paula Kingsnorth came to. I was really nervous about it because this was like all an online thing. Just podcasts, people doing things remotely, and talking to each other on Twitter. There'd been a couple of falling outs happening with people like too far on one side of the spectrum or another, and they thought, there should be more orthodoxy, which we wouldn't capitulate to. But then the in-person event, I was like, how is this going to go? I mean, these people are all over the map. I can say in theory that it should work, but you have to set some sort of tone where it doesn't evolve into somebody or another policing and ruining the whole fun of it. And so I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Paul McNeil, he's owns this wagon box place that we went in Wyoming, and he's basically like a right leaning version of my my left wing background is like in organic farms and like anarchist adjacent environmentalist stuff, and he was like right leaning, like libertarian Christian groups, but both kind of a similar ethos in many ways, like a horseshoe, kind of like off the grid, suspicious of power structures, suspicious of government and corporation, both. So anyways, he and I were like a good team for setting the tone of like, we're all kind of eccentrics here. We're all a little bit different thinking, but we can be respectful of one another. And so we had a bunch of different panels. Everybody was like, pluralistic, tolerant, like just, respectful.
Right. Even when there was disagreement.
Even when there was disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like this. Okay, I'll tell you a funny moment that happened. We had these more conservative thinkers who have this kind of thing called bison nationalism, is the idea of like a Teddy Roosevelt style conservation of the West, open spaces. We want to like recreate ecosystems in the West. And this is like exemplified by the bison, this American animal that had a really nice like ecological relationship with the Native Americans, cultivating these bison herds, whatever. And we're talking about like ecology and conservation and pollution. And Paul Kingsnorth, famous like left ecology activist, was like, oh, it's so great to see these conservatives have caught up with the leftist environmentalism of 1970, which was great. And everybody laughed. And it was like a great like convivial moment, where it's just
That's
like
great.
poking fun. But also everyone's saying like, yeah, but we all kind of like agree on these values of conservation and ecosystem restoration and some big picture vision of a like functioning ecology in America. And then the other thing I've done, and this was a lot of Paul McNeil's thinking. We've done different ways to like build like trust or conviviality. So besides like the panels where people are just having discussions, we do open mic singing. Paul Kingsnorth read a poem, a Yeats poem, which was like perfect. I had like chills from it. And the second night usually of these events, we do mini debates. And this is actually like a perfect social technology, if I'm going to talk like a sociologist, of like making this a more concrete understanding of like, we're not going to be tribal. We're not going to like be scolds and stick in the mud. We're going to have fun. So the mini debate is like somebody will come up and say, I'm against the internal combustion engine. And then somebody has to challenge them and be pro internal combustion engine. Are
you supposed to argue your own viewpoint, or preferably not?
You can do both.
You can do either.
Yeah. Or you can do like the one guy who went and did this anarchist vagabond guy, Andy Hickman. He is against the internal combustion engine, but he turned his argument up to 11, and made it absurd. Mm-hmm. Or Paul McNeil came up and he's like a landlord, and he argued against landlords. Okay, he's like, they're the scum of the earth, they're rent seeking. And then somebody had to argue for like private property ownership. And cool. It's one of those things where we're all sick and tired of just this like scolding type attitude that is like just unpleasant. I mean, nobody likes, of course, there's a different thing to have like serious disagreements and like serious conversations about like hard problems. But just like the constant scolding, constant like...
Well, yeah, because it feels like the political conversations that go on very rarely are really engaging with the disagreements for real.
Right.
It's strange. It's like we can't really get to that level of it. We're just kind of talking on the saying, well, how could you possibly disagree with me in a way is the main argument.
Right. The argument is literally just, how can you be this caricature of who I think you are? Mm-hmm. And it's like, instead, it's just fun to sort of play with those edges. Now, I don't necessarily, like I said, like there are people who have attended our events or even spoken at the events who have said things in other contexts that I totally disagree with. Mm-hmm. If there's too much of that, where I think that they're like a bad actor, then I do say like, well, that's not really my cup of tea. And we're trying to do something a little bit more moderate, I guess, than those more extreme things. Like there was a guy affiliated with it who's like a big into traditional Catholicism and was just saying some like too extreme things to me, in my opinion. I'm like, it's just, we don't need to associate. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think there's another question, which is, can you affiliate with someone who does say things you find objectionable, but says other things you like? And that's something we're navigating. I mean, think in general, I'm not responsible for the whole like breadth of somebody's thought if I agree with them on a smaller point. But that's something we're still like
trying to figure out. Do you think that that's kind of a challenge? Like, can you see how it would be?
It is starting.
Worried that the kind of Doomer Optimism thing would be kind of taken over or co-opted by forces.
This is always a question. I mean, so far it hasn't been, and it's been 3 years now running of these events and 5 years of the podcast, and it has been low stakes enough that it's not. And I don't know that it will ever get high stakes. I'm not sure. I mean, part of like my kind of like anarchist sensibilities is to like keep it very informal. Mm-hmm. It's not really a money-making thing. It's just kind of an informal gathering. I have like my vision is kind of Gertrude Stein in her salon in Paris. Like she's just a place where artists and writers come through, mm-hmm. and they kind of loosely affiliate with one another, but there's no like formal signing on of, it's not like no one's writing a manifesto. I think part of one thing you can really do is keep it loose, mm-hmm. and informal.
Mm-hmm. So you're keeping it kind of, it's structured enough so that it can be an actual thing, but not too structured so that it doesn't become brittle in a way.
Yeah. I think that's like, it is a kind of anti-fragile thing to just, because people have said, you've got to define it better,
mm-hmm. right?
Or you've got to formalize it more. But then I do think that is a point of fragility because then people can pinpoint it and then draw associations. And I don't know if you know about this, but there's this Guardian article that just came out about the wagon box. It only mentioned that there was a Doomer Optimism event there, but it didn't really mention Doomer Optimism, but I thought it might. But they were trying to affiliate people with one another. And James Pogue, the other one who is running the events with me, he's a journalist at the New York Times. They implicated him in it, and they're trying to draw these associations, but there's no formal associations. I mean, nobody's even like getting paid. It's just literally like, going to a place and talking for 15 minutes. It's not like, so there was some pushback against that kind of thing where it was like, this is a hotbed of far right activity. Mm-hmm. And me and James Pogue are like, we're not far right at all. Like, but they didn't mention me. But there is still that kind of thing going on. Yeah.
It's kind of this very strong, guilt by association, type of thing, which is interesting because it's, otherwise, when either side is doing it, they think that the other side is sort of being paranoid because, but it's kind of like saying just because you've been to this enormous conference with these 2,000 other people, as if you would agree with what all of these other 2,000 people think.
Right.
Just a quick break for some announcements. As some of you know, I've now launched a newsletter via Substack, so that you can receive episodes, events, and the occasional essay straight to your inbox. Head over to forestofthought.substack.com and join the mailing list, either as a free or paid subscriber. The podcast is made possible by listeners like you, so if you're enjoying these thought adventures, please consider supporting the podcast via Substack as mentioned, or via Patreon. You'll find information and direct links in the episode description or by visiting forestofthought.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. So in terms of, building community, what is it that you think is really important to be thinking about?
Yeah, so two layers. One is the sort of theory of change, like how do you make change in the world? And another one is like the practical realities of what people do to make those changes happen. So on the one level, I think we're sort of beyond this idea that we're supposed to protest as a way to solve social problems. I think we were kind of in this era where things were together. Things were we're at this richest point in human history where it's just things function. Social systems function. And the way to get some change was maybe to like make your voice heard, and to focus primarily on like ideology and politics, especially at the federal level. And in my opinion, I think that kind of thing is a dead end in the sense of it takes a lot of time. It takes your time away from something more proximate where there might be stronger agency, the ability to make change. And it focuses primarily on ideology and policy rather than, not that policy isn't action, but like something you could build closer to you and some place where you'll have more agency. And not everything, like I think part of it too is like ecology, like people, this sense of like abstraction. Federal politics is almost like this chaotic show, like reality TV show,
right?
Where you're like watching the policies come out, and this is similar to like the, how people watch cable news. You're watching the policies come out, you get outraged. It's like this very abstract, like sports. I mean, it's a sports program,
right?
And so then you go out on the street, and you're part of one team, and you're on that sports team, and you're thinking about all the ways in which your team is better. I'm much more interested in the proximate things that you can do on the far side of a collapsing society or disorganized. I mean, not necessarily, I'm not going to even say that I know for sure that we're on a collapse trajectory, because there's no telling what could happen, or even that I know we're deglobalizing, I'll say that, but even that we couldn't have pockets of bioregional renaissance. Like there's a huge potential opportunity in disintegration, disorganization. And so that's the Doomer side, like the disintegration, but then you get to reorganize in a period where you have more agency because things are breaking down, because the systems are not in stasis, because, and in some ways, like, yeah, the anointed technocrats are not in control anymore. Now that we've got the chaotic, like psychocrats or whatever. Although some of them are like, this is another thing. Like it's like impossible to say, but like there are people in the Trump administration who I like. They're the minority. I like some of what RFK says. I like the pollution stuff. It's okay to say that. Like, take the wins where you can get them. That's the other thing. So if there's anything that happens, even in the Trump administration, I'm not going to be mad at it if it's something I want. What? Like, you know what I mean? So that's the other thing team sports stops you from. It's like the whole thing's a one package, but instead, like, look, I'll take environmental pollution control wherever I can get it. I'm not going to be mad at it just because it's under the Trump administration. But then on the other side, like the building community side, I'm very much of the attitude that there's a lot of agency locally, especially regionally, especially because everybody's so, first of all, busy with their lives, but second of all, like focused on the only lever for power or changes at the federal level. So, we show up to like your local school board, your neighborhood, you like make a garden. I've been working on trying to get a teaching orchard going, not just in my yard, but like the city of Chicago gives away $1 lots for urban agriculture. So like that, I want to do like a teaching orchard where I can teach about like perennial agriculture in the neighborhood with local kids. These kinds of like points of agency of things I want to see more of in the world that I'm passionate about, that I like love. You can't believe how much power there is out there to take if you just show up. Nobody is showing up to these things. Local school board stuff. I mean, coaching, you can like, guide the youth just by, signing up for your kid's volleyball coach position. And you can help cultivate the kind of culture you want to see. These kinds of little things that in some ways seem very absurd because of how little the scale is. If all of us were focused, though, on that kind of action, even at a tiny scale, that scales out incredibly, And so I think people have this weird theory that, it can only happen top down, but I'm very much like a bottom up type person. And there's so much agency out there.
And what do you think about working in terms of like working, for example, in your local government or in the local institutions? Do you feel like, well, it's it's worth it to try to work from within the existing institutions, or rather to be starting things, starting new things?
Yeah. So I used to be 100% parallel new institutions when I moved to Uruguay because I was such a doomer about things. Now I guess I'm kind of a mix. Like, I think if an institution, well, I'll back up and say, first of all, I've seen enough like utopian visions. Let's say, let's start an intentional community. Let's start a school. Let's start, like some people in Silicon Valley are even saying like, let's start a new religion. There's a guy, Brian Johnson. He's trying to like reverse age himself. And he's explicitly said, I'm going to start a new religion. Those kind of utopian visions take for granted that many institutions have been, it's basically like an evolutionary structure, at least how I think about it. An institution gets iterated over however the length of, maybe it's centuries. Running a school, it's a complex social technology. You've got, the administration, you've got the teachers, you've got the students, the culture of the school, the curriculum. What is the role of the parents? How much control does the administration have? How much comes from outside? Like, that is a very delicate ecosystem that has evolved to the point that it's evolved because it continues to function. And starting from scratch, I've seen a lot of people start like, I'll just start as a homeschool. And it's like, are the parents the teachers? Are they the administrators who gets to say over what the curriculum is? Who pays what? These are just simple questions, but I've seen so many parallel institutions, quote unquote, start and fall so quickly because it's just chaos trying to start all those things from scratch. Unless it's something like very loose, not high stakes. Like Doomer Optimism is kind of like started from scratch. It's not overtaking a new institution, but it's loose, informal, low stakes, whatever. When it comes to something like a school, church, like civic organizations, my sense is that there's so much worth saving. And it's actually just a matter of showing up and breathing life into it, and breathing life into like what you want to see more of. I'm also a really strong believer in show, don't tell. And so you show up to school and you have like this kind of vision and you want to try to put it into practice. And if people experience it, then they really like it. If it goes well and it's a nice thing and works well, then people like it and they want to see more of it. And so, yeah, to the extent that you can rescue, you should. If something doesn't exist and you want to start with something new, like we have this picnic that we do with our neighbors. That's like once a month, we just go to the park and the neighbors come and everyone can come with their families and it's a potluck. And we're just like, we're going to be here, rain or shine, once a month, we're going to be here. And that's just a completely new thing, but it's a very informal. It's very like anti-fragile. It's just kind of like, just show up or not. That's a new thing. We're trying to create, you might call that an institution. If the picnic, once a month picnic starts to be something that's like persists, then it starts to become an institution. It's the Crescent Park picnic. We do this every month.
What do you think about? I think people find it hard to, especially if they live in an area where they feel like they don't have the same values or something, or like as their neighbors or that kind of thing. Do you feel that kind of improves with time, that you find out that you do have more in common, or like?
Yeah. So again, I would go back to what you have in common is the place you're from. Mm-hmm. And you might disagree about some more abstract things potentially, but ideally there's something going on in your community that you can agree about or find some sort of like a wholesome overlap. Everybody loves certain things like beautiful gardens, children, like functioning school. Like there's good just food. Good food. Like there's this is how it was with like the dissertation research. It's like beautiful local gardens, healthy food. Like, I don't know who could disagree. Like, it's just such an easy thing to agree about. And there's so many things like that that are just beautiful and wholesome. One thing we're really getting away from is just like this ability to hone in on that. We're abstract, not just like in scale, but like out of context, and also like losing an intuitive sense of what's beautiful. You know, we're like, it's like almost like our brains have been hijacked to like things we don't actually like, you know? And it's like, nobody even likes this. So it's like we were talking earlier before we recorded, like I'm talking to I'm at this big giant 2,000 person sustainability conference I have to do for my day job. And you're talking to people and they're like automatons. Like they don't even like their job. You can tell they're just saying a pitch, a script. I was actually talking to this is like a little bit of a tangent, but I was talking to another researcher who's like, he said he's a teacher and the undergraduate students are writing their essays with AI, and he has colleagues who are talking about having AI grade the papers. Yeah, exactly. So what are we even doing? We are just the sex organs of computers. We're just reproducing that we're just facilitating computers talking to each other.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What is that? Yeah. What are you thinking? Like as a teacher, what are you thinking? Why are you saying that? Why are you saying that? Like, you know what I mean? I just like want to shake people. Like, what are you doing even? And so,
well, also being in this kind of hotel, it's in this kind of a disembodied space. Yes. Like now we're up on, I don't know what floor.
Yeah, 14th
floor. You're kind
climate control.
Yeah, you're kind of floating in this other world in a way. And so, of course, that kind of environment is going to contribute to those kinds of discussions. Because if they had this conference at your homestead in Uruguay, inevitably
you start thinking different things. I know. And this is why, I mean, I think the wagon box in Wyoming, where we've had these Doomer Optimism events, facilitates that kind of thing. The field school, where we're out in the field, there is no school. There's no climate controlled building. The field school is in the field. People are like, where's Rizoma Field School? I'm like, it's not a place. It doesn't exist. It's in different fields, and literal fields. And the kind of conversations you have, like the salmon, counting the salmon, the kind of thinking you have. There's this Goethe, the philosopher poet, you know, he had this like Goethean science. It's like this naturalistic approach to science in context, through time, longitudinally too. And this was actually like a point of, I guess, epiphany for me with my dissertation research. A lot of the farmers I was talking to, let's say, despite using all these chemicals or whatever, they have an embodied longitudinal understanding of their land that is hundreds of thousands of data points embodied in their brain.
In their body.
In their body. In their body. They know when it's going to rain, when it rains, what happens, which part of the field holds the water, you know, where does it go in, and wind, and over the course of years, if not decades. And it just gets me so frustrated that like a technocrat thinks I'm going to measure soil health or something, one parameter out of the hundreds of thousands of parameters as farmers thinking about, and then come in and tell the farmer they have to do something X way because I'm a technocrat and you're bad. You know, you're a bad, dumb farmer who doesn't know anything, and I've got the data, so you have to do. So it's like to me, in some ways, this disembodied thing is like, especially when wielded by people who have more power, higher class structure, is a form of like control. And I don't think it's fair to people. And it's actually funny, in Uruguay, a lot of people, you know, there's always this meat question in environmental circles, but in my opinion, regeneratively grown meat is amongst the most ecological food product you can make. And in Uruguay, a lot of people are doing this regenerative agriculture. It's like great for the soil, great for the whole ecosystem. You can stack multiple types of production with livestock, and ecological, like habitat can exist along livestock, frogs and birds and everything. Anyways, like the Bill Gates Foundation came to Uruguay and is telling it to like go meatless. And it's like, you're going to come in. And this is where I get like I'm an indigenous studies person. You're going to come in from the global north and come tell these people who have had a ranching culture for the past centuries that they need to like do meatless, like lab meat in factories. and get off the landscape and lose their whole livelihood and way of doing things when they're like some of the most ecologically informed food producers in the world. That's when I start to get like mad about the global structures.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know?
Yeah, because it really encapsulates the things that we've been talking about in terms of like how we think that we can respond to the challenges that we're
and
meeting.
the abstract knowledge versus the embodied.
Exactly.
That's the real crux, I think.
Yeah.
Of this conversation, especially, is like the embodied understanding of people, nature, phenomena, institutions,
practice.
Local institutions, practice, all of it.
Yeah. Very good. Is there anything else that you, in terms of the things that we've been talking about, food, community, education, anything else that you would like to add?
I just think this kind of perspective, at least I've taken it to like every aspect of my life. Mm-hmm. And so including like being present for my kids, being embodied, like this is I think seemingly, like going back to that little AI tangent, like seemingly we're at this crossroads. Who do we want to be? Do we want to be like the facilitators of computers talking to each other? Do we want to be the money makers for corporate media? Or do we want to be like neighbors and mothers and friends and advocates and farmers and gardeners or whatever, And so to me, like, I just think this kind of perspective is actually seemingly, it seems like a big, like a lot to take on at once. But once you take on, you just take little bits at a time. And this is like the thing that we focused on the podcast is like, you just try something. I mean, I didn't know anything what I was doing when I went on 9 acres in Uruguay. And now I know a lot about like food production, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't know exactly how to parent or be a good mother, but I just tried it and made mistakes and got better at it, and hopefully can impart some of that wisdom to the next generation. And so these kinds of things, like, it's actually extremely hopeful, I think, to think this way, because then it just opens up this whole realm of possibilities where you're not stuck in this doom. Like, the doom actually takes away your agency. It takes away your humanity. If you're stuck in like this cycle of, the dopamine, scrolling the news, watching Trump's new thing, getting outraged, getting mad, cortisol spike, stress, anxiety. And I think some people get mad at me, maybe because they're like projecting, because they don't want to be stuck in it, and they are. Mm-hmm. And in some ways they think like they're better. They're morally better because they're stuck in this cycle of like moral quandary of politics. And so sometimes people get mad because I'm like nonchalant about it. I don't make it the center of my life. I'm just like, it is what it is. Like, you can only do so much. I don't know if it's like a Buddhist mentality or something. Like, you can only control what you can control, like, or the Serenity Prayer, And so I think it's just one of those things where once you can kind of let go of like control over those really abstract questions and thinking you can do too much to control it, a whole other world of possibilities opens up where you can ask yourself like, okay, what can I do with this time that I spent in that abstract world? What can I move toward? What do I want to see more of in the world? And even if it's like something so little, like, planting 5 little tomato plants, or offering you see a young mom with like 3 young kids and them as part of your family or whatever, let me hold your baby for you. Like, just little things like that where you can ask yourself in a moment, is there some way I can like make this more beautiful or wholesome, something I'd like to see more of in the world? I think people will say like, people should help each other out more. And they'll sit and like write a utopian long thread on Twitter or Substack or whatever. And it's like, what you could do? Just ask to hold the baby, or bring a meal.
Bring some meal to the mom. I was about to say, as a mom, I'm happy to hold the baby, but please cook me some food.
Exactly. Cook me some food. Like, just all these little things. I think to some extent, probably the critique I've gotten is all these little things aren't enough, but they add up. Mm-hmm. And they add to your quality of life, and they demonstrate something beautiful to others. So it's like, it's just a win-win thing. And I think to some extent you should think about it as like a form of resistance. And to me, that's like the political resistance is like, it's against the machine. The machine is this concept that Paul Kingsnorth has pulled from Yeats and, kind of pulled back out of the ether. But the machine is this big, Matt Taibbi called it the vampire squid, sucking the face off of humanity or something like that in one of his famous articles. But it's like this dehumanizing force, and I just feel like it's incumbent upon us to resist that. And any way we can, just by being embodied and moving towards some more wholesome and beautiful things. Anything you're interested in, education, transportation, food, agriculture, like municipal waste management. I don't care, like whatever it is. There's something like wholesome to be doing in the world.
Great. That sounds like a good note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was good.
You'll find links to the things we talked about in the show notes. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter to get episodes, essays, and events straight to your inbox. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider supporting it via Substack or Patreon. The podcast is made possible by people like you. Find more information in the show notes or visit forestofthought.com. All right, I'll talk to you next time.